pleased to be here and also pleased to introduce everybody from Resurrection to a former colleague and a good friend of mine, Dr. Phyllis Cavallone. She is here. She's the executive director for Ladder Up. They are a nonprofit organization that works with people who are low income and helping them do taxes. But they also provide this really wonderful service about Financial Aid 101, and they do some presentations to local schools and communities as they're working to prepare their students for college. So I'm very pleased and happy to introduce Dr. Cavallone to us this evening, who's going to be giving us the presentation, and wanted to say thank you so much for being here on behalf of Resurrection.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I feel very much at home. So nice to be here, everybody. Thanks for taking time out to join us this evening. As Dr. Matson said, I'm Dr. Cavallone. I'll be walking through Financial Aid 101 with you and of understanding all the ins and outs of financial aid. And there's been some changes. So even if you've done this before with an older child, there are a few updates this year, and we'll be walking through that. So without further ado, as mentioned by Dr. Matson, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ladder Up in case there is something here that we do besides even the workshop that we're covering tonight that might be helpful to you, someone in your family, or someone that you know. So we have three main services. We do provide free tax preparation for individuals that earn less than $62,000. And we do this for the Chicagoland area. And actually, we have digital services to meet the needs of people, anybody in Illinois. And we also have a free low-income tax clinic. It helps individuals and families with controversies with the Illinois a revenue service or the Illinois Department of Revenue. We help individuals navigate those. And then we have something called financial capabilities, which is why I'm here tonight, because we go over workshops to help on credit building, understanding credit scores, financial aid, budgeting, all sorts of things in that nature. So wanted to let you know a little bit about our services. So come around time to do taxes, maybe you can think about us. If we could be of help, we have about 15 sites that are around Chicagoland area, and one isn't too far from you. It's at Wright College, so maybe that's convenient for you. Or if someone you know lives somewhere else, you can go to our website at Go Ladder Up and check us out. All right, so we're going to begin understanding a little bit more about financial aid. The free application for federal student aid, otherwise known as Fafsa.
I listen better with my eyes closed.
Oops. Hi there. I heard a few people in if you maybe just make sure you're muted for a bit. But if you have questions, make sure you just put them in the chat, and I'm sure Dr. Matson will let me know or pause me to do a shout out. So FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's important to know that in Illinois, if you were a student was in a public school, it would be part of a graduation requirement. Because obviously you are not in a public school, it is something that is probably really highly recommended, but is not necessarily a graduation requirement, but is strongly encouraged. A little bit about what FAFSA does. So FAFSA is very important because it, completing it is the route for federal financial aid, including Pell Grants, including work-study programs, federal student loans. So you need to file the FAFSA to qualify for state and institutional aid, such as scholarships. So FAFSA is a pretty big deal. So completing the FAFSA when it opens is something we highly encourage for families to do. And I often hear, well, what is the algorithm? What is the formula? Should I apply? Maybe I make too much money. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but even those who are thinking only of taking a bit of a loan because they want their child to take a little bit of ownership in the process, this is the route to do so. So let's learn a little bit more. So little bit of context for what's going on this year, in case you have an older child who's gone through it, or someone in the family, or you knew a little bit, or even back on your own memory. There's something called the FAFSA Simplification Act that you may or may not have heard about this year. So let me talk to you a little bit about what that all means. So for many parents and students seeking post-secondary financial aid, filling out the FAFSA has been a little bit of a stressful, if not tearful, experience. And so there has been calls for many years to kind of change things, make them made a little easier. So the long-awaited changes to the free application for federal student aid enacted by what's called the Simplification Act have arrived this year to make completing this form easier. And it will help unlock aid to more students to help pay for college. So it's a good thing. So in addition to making the process easier for students, the FAFSA simplification effort also has expanded eligibility for many types of student aid. These changes were the result of something called the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022, which passed in December of 2020. So this act called for streamlining and simplifying measures of the FAFSA. And if you've heard of anything prior about the FAFSA or have done it, it was cumbersome. And maybe not everything is alleviated, but hopefully what we'll see this year will be a lighter lift. And I found this a bit interesting, going through and learning about all the changes this year as we went through this whole arc of this year and unfolding this. It's been about 40 years since major changes have occurred with FAFSA. So it is long awaited for sure. So the rollout date, you may hear Google, see different kinds of dates. Initially, they predicted that the FAFSA would open this year, December 1. We heard about a week-ish ago that it is now December 31st. And a few people are still saying that might even be pushed to the first week of January. But for right now, I'm going to say with a good amount of confidence that by the end of December, December 31st, this will open. Now, why do I say that? Traditionally, the open date for a number of years, it's been October 1. So if you have experience and knowledge of FAFSA in the past and you're wondering, did I miss something? No, because of all the changes, they did push it out a bit because they needed to fine tune a few things. It has been a total revamp, new process, new technology, everything. And we'll talk about a few pieces of that and what it means for a user. So it is December 31st, the year after, okay? So not even a full calendar year, but in October 1, there are plans for it to open for the following year. It wants to, the plan is to revert back to the October 1st date for subsequent years. So, all right. All right. What kinds of financial aid will there be if we apply for the FAFSA?
I smell bad all the time, Katie. Welcome to my world.
Financial aid is any form of funding that helps you pay for college. It helps make up the difference between what you could afford to pay and the actual cost of college. The primary purpose of the FAFSA is to determine something called a student aid index. You'll see SAI, and that's the estimated amount that the student and family can pay per year. The FAFSA unlocks financial aid in what I like to call four main buckets of grants and scholarship. Monies you don't have to necessarily think about giving back or, and there are the federal level, which is Pell Grant, the state money, which is the MAP grant, institutional money, and then some private funds. So the Pell Max in 23, from July 2nd through June 30th, 2024 was about just under 7,400. Typically, they raise the amount of around 500 every year. The Illinois MAP money is about 8,400. I want to say a word of caution on the MAP money. The state aid does cap out, meaning there's a certain amount set aside. Once it's distributed, unless it gets released because someone declines to take it, it's gone and gets exhausted. So there is a little bit of like, when the FAFSA does open every year, this isn't just unique to this year, that it is a first come, first serve model. So we do encourage people to apply soon after, in reasonable time once the application does open, because if you're eligible for several of these buckets, you want to be able to make sure you get what you would be allotted and the maximum amount of that. Okay. So what does the FAFSA calculate? Again, we talked about that student aid index. I want to talk a little bit about something called cost of attendance too. So this is the average annual cost to attend a particular college or university. It includes tuition, fees, room and board, books, supplies, and other expenses. The cost of attendance is used to calculate how much financial aid a student is eligible for based on the FAFSA results. So there's several changes to the definition of cost of attendance as part of that FAFSA Simplification Act we talked about in a couple slides ago. Things that you might want to be aware of. So for the first time, the U.S. Department of Education is kind of getting a little bit nosy about that cost of attendance. And it's helping to regulate it. And it's asking colleges and universities to be clearer in their messaging of what the fees are, what the costs are. So colleges now must include more details about the cost of attendance for their institution. In the past, you may or may not kind of either recall this or maybe not so surprised, colleges could be kind of general about costs. But changes now call for them to be very, very clear. They must spell things out. Room and board, you're going to see words now called housing and food, and it's going to be grouped in with living expenses. It breaks down food, housing into specific scenarios, such as living on campus versus off campus and having a meal plan versus grocery shopping and cooking. Colleges can no longer set the housing allowance of cost of attendance to zero if a student lives at home with their parents. Some of them did. Food allowance must be based now on 3 meals per day instead of 2. Kind of interesting. Transportation costs must now include travel between home, school, and work, not just home and school. And colleges can choose to include other transportation costs, such as going to conferences, field trips, and medical residency reviews, if they are part of the university's program of study. The cost of attendance must include actual loan fees for federal loans, but cannot include loan fees for private student loans. And also, the cost of attendance must now also include cost of rental or purchase of a personal computer, even if a student is not enrolled at least half time. So you can find any college's cost of attendance by Googling and searching a college's name and cost of attendance. Okay. All right. Next, the FAFSA ID. So the FAFSA ID will be required for all applicants, spouses, and parents. Each FAFSA ID needs to be created and verified. And now this takes 1 to 3 days before starting the FAFSA. So in previous years, we would be able to help somebody go right in and finish the FAFSA, and they could have just started at ground zero with us, and we could have set them up on their FAFSA ID, and we go right to the FAFSA and do that. So step 1 is this FAFSA ID. Now there's a little bit of a process, and the turnaround time is 1 to 3 days. So, but here's some good news. Literally tonight after we talk here, you can set up a FAFSA ID and you can get it approved within 1 to 3 days. Each person entering information on the FAFSA is considered a contributor, and that student will be the student will be the main contributor. The student invites others like yourself, the parent, to contribute. The student will submit the contributor's name, email, date of birth, and social security number. So they set it up, they create their own FAFSA ID, and then they go in and they are like, well, I need my parents to help. And they go in and they put this information in. You'd receive an invite in the form of an email to set up a FAFSA ID. The contributor, mom and dad, can only complete their section, such as the parent section. Their visibility is limited to only their section. Previously, if you've done a FAFSA, you can kind of go in back and forth and you can kind of buddy it through and see all the screens. This is not the case anymore. You're only able to see your section. And dependent students, many of which our students are, will not be able to see a submit button until the parent section is done. So this is a little bit different. They are locked out in submitting until the contributor, i.e. their parent, is done with their section. Okay. This FAFSA ID that you create for the completing the FAFSA will follow you, the student, for years. We recommend not using a high school or college email. We ask that you use a personal email and phone number. Why? Because when you graduate high school or graduate college, often after either weeks or a couple months, those emails are retired. You want to have access to the email for years. And so therefore you want to have your own personal one. So maybe we'll make a little note about that. For individuals without social security number, when applying for a FAFSA ID, you will see a box underneath your name and date of birth fields. If you do not have a social security, you will click the box, I do not have a social security number. As you fill out the rest of the personal information, you will need to enter an email and a phone number. Only US numbers will be used. And if you don't have one, you're going to leave that blank. Those without social security numbers will be asked several what's called knowledge-based questions, like where do you live, where did you live some years ago, etc., to assist with the verification of their person. Once everything is answered, the FSA ID will be either instantly verified, and because there's no information to route through Social Security office because they don't, individuals without Social Security don't have one, or you'll see a message that needs to be responded to saying contact a particular office or call a number because there's additional information needed to verify someone's identity. Okay, as we noted before, we believe the FAFSA this year will open December 31st. I'm just the messenger here. I just wanted to let you know. We had hoped around this time, Dr. Mattson and I lining this up, thought it was just perfectly timed for the December 1, open date, which they had said for many months would be the time, but they moved it a little bit, but that's okay. We're still better be a little bit early than be late. So mark your calendar and then remember the following year, just around the corner, then it will be October 1 thereafter. Good news, the new FAFSA will be shorter. The number of questions on the FAFSA will decrease from 108 questions to somewhere between 30 and 40. So that's definitely really good news. And the questions are intended to be much simpler and easier to understand. The variability of the number of questions is due to a little bit of intelligent skip logic and better alignment of the form with the federal income tax returns, as we noted before. They are aligning the information more to tax returns. You're going to have to agree to use something called the IRS Direct Data Exchange, the DDX you're going to see. And what will enable to do is upload the data from the IRS that you've entered from your return, and things will automatically populate. So that is really great news. So because of this, as we had discussed, that FAFSA ID will be required for all applicants, spouses, and parents. And unlike the old FAFSA, parents who uh, don't have social security numbers at the time will be rerouted to another way of getting a FAFSA ID. So as we talked about before, they'll be using some information with questions about their residency, et cetera, like their address and so forth. Okay. We usually get a lot of questions about dependency. I think I fielded 2 questions today on this. So understanding right off who is a parent. So for purposes of FAFSA, a parent is the adoptive parent, a biological parent, or a step parent if married to a biological or adoptive parent. If both parents, biological or adoptive, are unmarried but living together, information from both will be reported. Essentially, they're going to be treated as joint contributors. All right. Sometimes we have divorce or separation among parents, and how will that be navigated with the changes? So there are changes coming this year with how that is treated. So parents who are divorced or separated, to better align with the FAFSA with federal income tax returns, the following will occur. The parent responsible for filing the FAFSA will now be based on whichever parent provides more financial support, not the parent with whom the student resides. So if both parents provide equal financial support to the student, then the parent with the larger income is now going to be responsible for completing the FAFSA. Therefore, with the new FAFSA changes, where the student lives will be irrelevant. So that is very, very different from previous versions of the FAFSA. A little bit more on dependency status. You are independent if you're age 24 or older as of December 31st of the award year, legally married, graduate, professional student, veteran, or serving in active duty, have legal dependents other than a spouse. For more than 50% of the support is provided by the student, orphan, ward of the court, foster care, adopted, emancipated minor, or in legal guardianship as determined by a court. Unaccompanied youth who is homeless or at risk of being homeless. Here are some other changes. So this one's kind of neat. Prospective colleges. The new FAFSA will allow students to list as many as 20 colleges, and this is up from 10 in previous years. Students who need to list more than 20 colleges can do so by waiting until they receive the FAFSA submission summary, the new name for the student aid report, which will come, and delete the colleges from their FAFSA and then replace them with additional ones. I'm sure Dr. Mattson and your school's going to give you some great advice as to how you select your 20 to put in there. Usually it's a little combination of some junior colleges, public, private, in-state schools, out of state, etc., and having a mix so that when you receive your award letter, you can really seem to compare the bottom line of what it will be for the cost of attending the colleges that are listed. So follow that advice. Maybe some internal discussions at home could be made about what colleges are to be listed. We always recommend more than just 1 or 2. And then I always like to call out that listing the colleges on the FAFSA does not mean that you've actually applied to the actual college or university. That is a separate application. So make sure that all that are listed, if you are serious about them, that they need to have an application submitted. Right. A little bit about appeals, otherwise known as something called professional judgments. So we often get asked, you know, I filled out the FAFSA, I did the questions, I feel okay, but there's some complications going on in our life, and I'm not sure if the FAFSA really kind of captured all of that complexity. What do I do? Well, here's some good news with the changes. So institutions now must consider all appeal requests. Remember, these are called professional judgments now So now they must consider all of them, and they may not maintain a policy of denying all professional judgment requests broadly. So some places could have said, we don't make any considerations. Once our decision was given in the spring, you signed off on it. Doesn't matter if things changed or if there's complexities that weren't captured. They could hold by the award letter and not budge. Now they can't do that. Colleges must also not only review everything by case basis, they must post the appeal information on their institution's website for students who wish to pursue an adjustment based on either a special or unusual circumstances. So this is a good place to look if you're seeking an appeal or consideration or to just even be heard. Look on the website. The detailed information should be listed at least there, if not maybe other places like a handbook. Colleges must consider requests for dependency override no later than 60 days after the start of a student's enrollment. That's also an update. The FAFSA Simplification Act distinguishes between two different categories of appeals. So on that note of like, doesn't capture all the complexities going on in our situation, what do I do? So for purposes of understanding, there's two kinds of professional judgments. One is special circumstances, and that's kind of refers to financial situations. Somebody lost a job, recent unemployment, and it justifies an aid administrator at the college to adjust the data elements in the cost of attendance or in the SAI calculation. So things happen, right? Things could be different. The time you submit your data, when the FAFSA opens, when you complete the FAFSA, by the time the fall starts, or even after the fall start, something changes. So it would be under special circumstances if it's financial in that way. Unusual circumstances refers to the conditions that justify an aid administrator to make an adjustment to a student's dependency status. In other words, going from dependent to independent. And those are unique situations: human trafficking, refugee asylum status, parental abandonment, incarceration, things of that nature. And we call those dependency overrides. So there are times when a student may have both a special circumstance and an unusual circumstance. Financial aid administrators may make adjustments that are appropriate to each student's situation with the appropriate documentation. Remember, they must listen to all requests. My advice is, if there is something going on that's unique in the family, even things that I'm not mentioning here, make an appointment. I always do feel a little bit for the universities, the financial aid office at the universities, because quite often a lot of people just kind of walk in and they really don't get their questions and their situation heard in the way that they should, because a 5-minute connect is not enough time. If there is something going on and you want to have a conversation about what to do, my advice is, whether it's early on or right after school starts, email or call and make a formal appointment with a financial aid officer, and sit down, have your documents, collect your thoughts, go through things. Walking in to the office, might not be super fruitful, and often the offices are quite busy, and you might leave a little bit frustrated. So if you could keep that in mind, even if all things are good right now, keep that in mind, because life happens and sometimes things do change in our life, and we just like to recommend making an appointment and really sitting down and going through things if that is something that is needed. I always like to talk about something called FAFSA verification. So what is this, and why do we need to hear about it? It may not affect you, and you may go, oh, what was that slide about? I've never heard of that. And for some students, they hear about it every year. So what is this? It is sort of a financial aid audit in some ways. So about 20% of all FAFSA applications get pulled for verification. And the reason for the selection is it could be random. The college has a process of randomizing students, and it is just that it is. It's random. It could be information entered in the FAFSA was either incomplete or inaccurate, or maybe just a typo. One of the ones I always like to mention is quite often for date of birth or something to do with the date, people put in today's date or 2023, if you will, rather than like maybe the birth year or things like that. It could be something really straightforward and a typo, or they transpose numbers. And so it's an easy fix. It could be that tax returns are inaccurate and they're questioning it. Because remember, your information is being loaded up through the DDX. You're granting permission when you're filling out the FAFSA that the two talk to each other. So the FAFSA and the IRS is going to talk to each other, and that information is going to get populated in the FAFSA. So if there is something that is not right there or questionable, it could be the reason for verification. And it also could mean too that for whatever reason the college performs verification what's called en masse, meaning every third student or all the incoming freshmen, things of that nature. So what happens if this happens to you as a student? Well, first of all, stay calm, don't panic. It is very important to deal with this, but you need to stay calm. Students, so parents, I'm talking to you. If there's any students in the earshot, I'm also speaking to you. This will typically go to the student because they're 18 or older. They need to read their email. They need to respond to their email. They need to gather the information that's asked of them. It could be simply, is this a typo? It's noted here that there are 11 siblings in your family, and they could be questioning it. And you go, yeah, I have 11. These are who lives in my house. Oh, okay. And then they move on. It could be a little bit more involved. It could be even ask for some stuff and I don't understand it. Remember what I said a slide or two ago. If deal with what you can, and if you're unsure about something, call the office, make an appointment, go through things so it's easier understood, so you can complete it. Because if it's not completed by the due date that they give you, they could pull the financial aid, and that is never pleasant. So make sure you submit things on time, make sure you communicate, make sure right from the moment of enrollment, emails are being read and things are being reviewed. So, and contact that financial aid office. I say this over and over again. If you don't understand anything that you're seeing and you're getting nervous, not responding is not going to get you in a good place. And we want you to make sure you remediate whatever it is that they're questioning and take care of it. So a little bit more, and this is not about the FAFSA, this is about something else. So depending on the college that you apply, remember there's lots of colleges throughout the US. So depending on that college, in addition to the FAFSA, you might get a response saying, thank you for the FAFSA, thank you for your application to our university, but we need you to fill out another application before we give you an award letter. And that is called the College Scholarship Service, the CSS profile. This additional application helps some institutions determine state and institutional financial aid. The CSS profile is operated by the College Board, and the College Board are the SAT folks, the people who create the tests for all those AP exams. So they have this as well. Currently, around 240 institutions throughout the US use the CSS profile. So pretty big number. And they use it to determine institutional aid eligibility, as I noted. So they might accept the FAFSA, but to really kind of give that additional money, including their own money, they want this information for you. And the profile usually wants a little bit more information than the FAFSA, not usually, it does. It will collect information on a family's annual income as well as medical expenses and anything else that could affect a student's ability to pay. And unlike the FAFSA, if parents are divorced, information from both will be needed, and both will need to complete the profile separately. And then they take that and they make their determination. So remember, the FAFSA and the CSS profile applications are entirely separate. The FAFSA is free, 20, 30 questions. A lot of information is uploaded from the IRS. The CSS profile asks more detail, a lot more detail. And there is a little bit of a fee. The CSS profile costs $25 to submit for one school and about $16 for each additional school. So you need to be aware of it. You know, some people limit it. Some people do not want to do that if there's a fee, but just so that you know, and you have an awareness of that. So it's not for every school, but you may see that. All right. Because I am the tax lady, as I mentioned, if you were with me a little earlier, you heard about the services that Ladder Up provides. And one of the services is free tax prep. Well, in that, I like to talk about some tax credits. Well, here we are to that. This is called the 1098T. So once your student goes to college, or if you have students already in college, you may have an awareness of this, or if you attended. So what does this do? So around the end of January of every year a student is in college, you will be given an email notice that your 1098T is ready. They don't mail this, unlike W-2s and 1099s and some other things, which typically get mailed. This one is usually just an email notice is given that it is ready to download. And you'll need to follow the instructions to download this document and bring it to your tax preparer. So what is the 1098T and what does it do for you? So this is a tax form where a college reports on how much qualified tuition and expenses either the student or the parents paid during the tax year. And when you are ready to file your federal income tax return, you bring this. And if you receive one, there are some instances where one is not issued, and we'll talk about it in a second. It can help you claim one of two potentially valuable education credits: the American Opportunity Credit or the Lifetime Learning Credit. And who gets the credit? Part of determining who uses the credit is about dependency status. So if the student is independent, then the student will get the credit. If a student is a dependent, meaning mom and dad are in the picture, then the parents would claim it. No double dipping. Only one can claim it. Because you don't want to trigger a notice from the IRS. But it is a nice credit. It is somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500, depending, and also depending on what the numbers are in these boxes here, could also be very interesting and beneficial to you. So some colleges, though, do not issue one, so don't be alarmed. Some junior colleges don't. Courses that don't offer academic credit, if you're a non-resident alien, students will not receive that. If the school waived tuition and expenses, or if everything was covered entirely by scholarship, if you're an employer or a government agency like the Department of Veteran Affairs or the Department of Defense, your tuition is probably entirely covered and you won't see one. But a lot do issue them. Usually they're in the portal where you pay tuition. You go in and you could see them, and you can download them, and they're there by year, so you can even go back a year or two and see them there over multiple years. So do want to make mention of that. So if you have questions, our information email is info@GoLadderUp. You could check us out at goladderup.org if you want to look at some of our services or get some more information. We have some nice videos and articles to read, and hopefully they're very helpful to you. I had said Dr. Mattson would be looking at the chat if there's some general questions that are general in nature. I can answer them for you. And if I don't know the answer just yet, I can email back and get that for you. So I'm going to pause here.
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but feel free if anybody would like to put a question or two in the chat. We can definitely answer those, and we'll wait for just a couple minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions coming in through the chat. If anybody does have some remaining, definitely feel free to ask. But otherwise, thank you very much for coming.
I appreciate. Thank you for having me, Dr. Mattson. And when it does open, when FAFSA does open, just keep us in mind. If there are questions that parents have, they can call. We can make one-on-one appointments, even in a virtual setting, and answer those questions and accompany them. We are all learning a little bit because of all the changes. So navigating this together, is a good thing. By and large, everything I have seen though this year, parents, I think we're going to be largely pretty happy with the changes that we're seeing. I think they've done an incredible job trying to make it easier and respond to things that seem to be quite hard to navigate for a lot of people in prior years. So I hope the experience for you is an easier lift, and we are here to help you once it opens. So
great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Cavallone. We really do appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead now and stop the recording. But if people do want the recording, we will have that posted on our website, hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow.